You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Bark and Wag is dedicated to protecting our dogs through advocacy, education, and supporting like-minded dog lovers by selling custom pet products. Bark and Wag is excited to announce our new partnership with a Colorado hemp farm to produce a line of CBD products for your pets. Bark and Wag has CBD pet tincture available in 300, 750, 1200, and 2400 milligrams. Bark and Wag CBD is pet safe, no THC, it's made in the USA, and is CO2 extracted. Please check out Bark and Wag's website, barkandwag.com. That is BARK, to see our line of CBD and awesome merchandise. We love pooch ideas for podcasts and merchandise, so anytime send an email to Polly at barkandwag.com with your suggestions.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to Kersti Moss, co-owner of Dog Training Camp USA out of North Carolina. Welcome, Kersti.
Hi, Polly. Thanks for having me back.
I wanted to have you back on the podcast to talk about how, as dog owners, we prevent separation anxiety as everyone transitions back to school and work.
Ooh, that is probably the number one behavior that we are dealing with right now because of COVID and everything. So this is a really good topic. So a lot of times separation anxiety, especially right now, this whole year and a half, we've been at home with our dogs, which has been great. But at the same time, once we all go back to our somewhat normal lives, the dogs aren't going to know what to do without us because we've been there the whole time. So it's really important that we start creating routines now before you go back. Start creating routines of them having some time to themselves. So even if you're home all day, it's a really good idea to start transitioning into having your dog stay in a different room for a small amount of time. So you're not making a big drastic change, but maybe after your daily walk, say after you go for a walk in the morning when your dog is already relaxed, put them in a room, put them in the kitchen. If you do a crate, that's an even better idea. Give them something to chew and have them settle down where you go away. So you might go upstairs to work or into your office. Do something that kind of changes the routine just a little bit to get them eased into settling down on their own so they get used to just that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, yeah, and it's just starting really small, and that it's so important because it can become such a big issue. Dogs can be destructive. They can harm themselves if they're really panicked because they're just not used to being alone all of a sudden. So creating that routine now and then building on it. So you start with, just a small amount of time that they're away from you, and then build on that to 30 minutes to an hour, and then maybe do half a day, where it doesn't mean that they are completely alone and separated, but they're just not right at your feet immediately beside you, if that makes sense, and then kind of go from there.
And another thing is people need to realize that you can't leave your dogs for 8 to 9 hours while you go to work.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to come up with a plan if you decided to adopt a dog during COVID, that you need a dog walker, you need doggy daycare, you need a next door neighbor, who has a high school child or a middle schooler to come and let the dog out. So and there's lots of different options.
Yeah, and we see a lot of people too that might live a little bit closer to work so they can come home on their work break. Now, as far as them being home alone all day, most of the time, say you're working from home now, you kind of get a good general idea of how long your dog can hold it. So most of the time they're asleep throughout the day, as long as you've had, some good morning activity, some play in the yard or going for a walk, something like that. Then after that, an adult dog is ready to come inside and kind of settle down. So to me, an 8-hour day isn't terribly long. That's a fair amount of time for them to be alone, as long as you've given them proper outlets and they have something to chew. But anything longer than that, that's when you do want to give them those breaks. And I kind of go with the 8 hours because I think about when you go to sleep at night, they're making it through the night. They may get up and have water or things like that, but it's not terribly long. But if you're looking at 9, 10, 12-hour days, those are ones for sure that you should consider getting someone to let them out in the middle of the day, or maybe some doggy daycare, things like that. And I know a lot of workplaces too are now doing some type of dog integration as people come back to work, because dogs have become such a big part of all of our lives. So that's a thing too. People are fortunate if they've got that with their jobs.
I know. It's so neat to see all the things popping up in Colorado with the bars and the mini golf, like it's all dog related. Yeah. There's a new restaurant that opened, and it's all like outdoor seating, and everyone brings their dogs, and it's right on the river. It's pretty neat to see how dogs there's more laws being passed to protect them. But I do know that this is a huge deal, and a lot of rescues, because I volunteer a lot at the rescues, are getting more and more dogs back. Because people didn't understand the time commitment.
Right. Well, and so one of the things we see here in North Carolina with rescues is people got a dog at the start of the pandemic, and they spent every waking moment with the dog. So the dog never learned just to kind of settle down or, just kind of be on their own, the same way that we get used to being independent of our parents when we're little. And so a lot of rescues are seeing dogs with extreme separation anxiety that we haven't really seen it this extreme until now, where all these dogs have been at home and spent every minute with their kids and with their family. And now suddenly they're home alone, and that was never a part of their life before. So that's a really hard thing for a young puppy to overcome. So starting now, if you're working through some types of separation anxiety, it is a good idea to create routines of being alone, but it also goes back to having your dog in your space. So if you've got an extra clingy dog, just kind of creating some boundaries where they're not always in your space too, because sometimes separation anxiety can come from a dog thinking that they have to be beside you. So they think it's their job to take care of you and protect you, which it is. That's the reason we have our dogs. But at the same time, they need that healthy attachment to see, okay, you're totally okay if you go into the kitchen without me or if you go check the mail. So if you're dealing with more extreme behaviors, I would recommend finding a local trainer that can help you kind of work towards building some confidence without you, so that it doesn't fall apart when you have to go back to work or to school.
Yeah, that is an excellent point, is to just Googling what to do versus actually having someone that's a behaviorist come and help.
Yeah.
So, well, any other tips?
Not that I can think of. Just kind of start small. That's the biggest thing. If you're dealing with it and feeling kind of overwhelmed, start really small with going for a walk first, so your dog is already relaxed, and then, have them settle down and give them a bone or a bully stick, something to chew on while they're alone too. So it kind of takes their mind off of the fact that you're in a different room.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, and we look forward to having you back.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.